Okay, good afternoon, class. So we are now with your module 9 under your Human Anatomy and Physiology, which is entitled as Endocrine System. So this endocrine system is different um, with your previous lesson in your biochemistry. Okay, so let us first discuss about the objectives of this module. Okay, so by the end of this module, the student should be able to first list the functions of the hormones. So the first part of your module is about the functions of the hormones. The next is to classify hormones into chemical categories. Okay, so when you say hormones, that is under the chemicals, and your nervous system is under the electrical. Discuss the endocrine glands and their location. So which means that let us identify which part of the body is the endocrine glands found. So you have already a background about your endocrine glands or the locations of your endocrine glands in your body with your previous subject, which is biochemistry. Okay, so the content of your module here are the functions and classification of hormones. Okay, also the major endocrine glands and their hormones. So let us first talk or overview about the endocrine system. So when you say class endocrine system, it is refers about the hormones. So if you remember with our previous lesson, in your module, in your biochemistry, when you say hormones, it is different from your neurotransmitters. So your endocrine systems, ang kanyang function is under the hormones, and your nervous system are the neurons. So direct ang respond ng ating neurotransmitters, but when you say hormones, it is under muna with your bloodstream before the into the bloodstream, because through the bloodstream yung hormones are distributed into the target organ. Okay, so it says here that in order to maintain the homeostasis of inside our body, the internal environment, for example, if there is an increase of glucose inside our body, in order to maintain this homeostasis, it is necessarily for us to have these hormones. So that's the function of your hormones, one of the functions of your hormones. Okay, maintenance of the homeostasis, which include the growth. So for example, there are different hormones inside our body that regulate the growth hormone. Okay, how about the maturation? So during the puberty stage, okay, so magkakaroon kayo ng maturity inside our body. So there is a presence of paglalaki ng mga daddy sa mga girls, pagkakaroon ng madam sapple, reproduction. So dahil during the puberty stage ay ang mga babae nag-menstruate na, and then nagpo-produce ng testosterone for the boys, and for the girls ay sex hormones or the estrogen, okay, which means that they are able to reproduce. Metabolism. So inside our body, there are different organs which are responsible for this, which are listed by your hormones in order to metabolize or in order to digest food, which are responsible for the digestive process, and then also with the human behavior. Okay, your hypothalamus is a part of your diencephalon, which is a part of your brain, which is responsible to send messages towards in order to produce the neurotransmitters during fight or flight. Okay, so pag-govern ng neurotransmitters, that is under your nervous system, but hormones during the fight or flight, like for example, your epinephrine, okay, so that is under the internal factors, which means that is under your endocrine system. Pag external factor, that is under the nervous system or the neurotransmitters. Okay, the endocrine glands are the ductless glands, which are secreted hormones into the bloodstream. As I have said, mag-produce muna into the bloodstream in order to function these hormones. The blood circulation carries the hormones to the target organs to produce responses. So, like for example, with your previous lesson in your nervous system about the neurotransmitters. So pag nakatouch through your sense of touch, pag nakatouch ka ng hot surface, what is the reaction? The immediate response is to towards the stimulus is to remove your hand. So that is under the fight or flight. But when you say under the hormones, okay, so in order to produce the homeostasis, it takes time kasi i-release pa siya into the hormones. The function of this is to maintain the homeostasis. Hormones control fluids of the human body and water amounts in order to maintain body electrolytes. So like for example, the sodium-potassium pump in your cell. Diba? So like for example, the sodium should be out of the cell and then the potassium should be inside of the cell. Okay? So the hormones ang nag-govern noon in order to maintain the electrolytes balances inside our body and the functions or the normal functions of our kidneys or our kidney cells, okay, through the govern of your kidney hormones or the aldosterone, or that is the function of your aldosterone hormone is to govern or to maintain the homeostasis inside your kidneys. Hormones also control other hormones. So like for example, your pituitary gland is a master gland, which means pag master gland siya class, it stimulates also the other glands in order to maintain the release of your hormones in order to maintain the homeostasis. Hindi lang isa ang nagtatrabaho. Classification of hormones. The hormones are classified into three: the amino acids, protein hormones, and then the steroid hormones. So pag siya ay under the epinephrine and norepinephrine, that is under the amino acid hormones. But when you say about the pancreas related, so for example, your insulin, your glucagon, your growth hormone, your anterior pituitary glands, that is under the protein hormones. But when you say steroid hormones, yung mga anti-inflammatory hormones, anti-inflammatory drugs, so govern yan under sila ng steroid hormones. What are they? So these are the cortisol. Your cortisol is released to lessen the metabolism. Diba? So that is from your adrenal cortex and then your estrogen, which governed by your ovaries, and then your gonads for the testosterone. So which means that your testosterone for this is for the men, and then the estrogen for the girls or for the women. The hypothalamus is found in the inferior portion of the diencephalon. So when you say the inferior which means inferior portion, which means at the lower part, because superior means up sa taas, and then the lower portion is below. The anterior is in front, and then the back is the posterior. So your hypothalamus is found at the inferior portion of your diencephalon, which is your diencephalon is a part of the brain. This is the one that controls the secretion of your pituitary gland. That is the reason why your pituitary gland is found in your brain. Okay, so yun yung function ng ating hypothalamus. This is the one that controls, okay, the secretion came from your pituitary gland. Alalahanin nyo, master gland at pituitary gland, and stimulates other hormones. So in order to maintain the homeostasis and control the secretions, ang hypothalamus ang govern on. Okay, the hypothalamus of the brain is the one that sends neutral and chemical signals to the pituitary gland. So which means that your hypothalamus is the one that controls it, the signals. Okay? So hindi siya pwedeng magpa-overuse ng ating pituitary gland because of that hypothalamus. So the nerve cells of the hypothalamus are the one that produce the chemical signals, which are known as the hormones. Okay, so for example, the inhibitory, the release of the hormones, and then the inhibits the hormones. So dahil ang hypothalamus niya ang nag-neutralize, ano lang yung pwedeng i-inhibit, ano lang yung pwedeng i-release. Why? Because if there is an overproduction, dapat i-inhibit siya, i-control. But there is an impulsion, dapat may stimulation. Okay? The hormones which are released enter the capillary bed of the hypothalamus. So when you say capillaries, into the bloodstream. Okay? And this is transported to the different parts. So under the siya ng blood circulation. Okay, ang hormones are released into your blood circulation, and this is transported to the target cells. The interaction between the endocrine system and the nervous systems are maintained and controlled, which means that they go hand in hand. But the hormones is under the endocrine system, and then the neurotransmitters are under the nervous system. They go hand in hand, but with different paano mag-regulate. Basta same lang ang kanilang functions is in order to maintain the homeostasis. But take note that the internal environment governed by your hormones, and the external environment governed by your nervous system. It needs an immediate response. Okay, so for example, paano kung wala kang reaction na makatouch ka na mainit? What happened? It produce burn. That is the function of your neurotransmitters. Okay, but in order to maintain the internal environment inside our body, the hormones are released into the bloodstream. The major endocrine glands and their hormones. What are the endocrine glands and their hormones? So, di ba naalala nyo sa inyong previous lesson about the different parts inside our body? Meron kayo nakikita inside the brain, in your neck portion, at the lower portion of your neck. Okay? The melatonin, naalala nyo yung class? Okay? So, the endocrine glands are the pituitary gland. So, ano yun? The endocrine glands, these are your pituitary gland, your pineal gland, your thyroid gland, your parathyroid glands, your thymus gland, your adrenal glands, your islet of Langerhans, which are released by your pancreas, the ovaries for the women, as well as the testes for men. Okay, let us go this one by one. Okay, so let us first tackle about the anterior pituitary gland. So kung merong anterior, merong posterior. So when you see anterior, ano yung class? At the pituitary gland known as the hypophysis, which is a small gland, so it's here. Okay, this is your pituitary gland. Okay, so meron kayong anterior portion, which is, and meron kayong posterior portion. When you say anterior, nasa harapan. When you say posterior, nasa likuran. Okay, so this is your pituitary gland. Okay, so this is your, this one is your diencephalon. This one is your brainstem. Okay, this one is your spinal cord kasi. Diba? If you remember with you, this is your cerebellum. Okay, so lower portion nyo is that. I think this is this is your brainstem kasi this one is your brainstem. This one. At ang kasunod nun is your spinal cord. The next for this. But here, your pituitary gland here is found inside your brain. Okay, so this is, di ba siya, the one that controls your pituitary gland is your hypothalamus. This is found at the sphenoid bone below the hypothalamus. Okay, so this is your hypothalamus at yung inyong pituitary gland is found at the below your hypothalamus. Okay, which is divided into two lobes. So meron siyang dalawang lobes, the anterior portion and then the posterior portion. Ito yun yung inyong pituitary gland. Meron siyang harapan, meron siyang nasa likuran. The 7 hormones which are produced by your anterior pituitary lobe, which are the growth hormone. So yung nag-govern ng ating paglaki, then stimulates the metabolism also. Okay, so take note class that your pituitary gland ay marami siyang galamay, kaya nga tawag sa kanya that is the master gland. The growth hormone secretion controlled by the release of hormones from the hypothalamus, ones inhibit and the other one stimulates. That is the reason why merong kaso na giantism or gigantism and then the dwarfism, which is under the growth hormone. The peak secretion or yung pinakamataas na secretion ng growth hormone during sleep. That is how important is our sleep. Okay? Kasi ang sleep ay nagpapatangka din. Exercise and fasting and during puberty growth is influenced by through nutrition, genetics, and then the sex hormones. How about when you say the posterior pituitary glands and their hormones? The posterior pituitary lobe is made up of nerve fibers, the neuroglial cells in order to support the nerve fibers. So these are the part of the cells, of your nerve cells. Special neurons of the hypothalamus produce hormones of the posterior pituitary lobe. How about when you say antidiuretic hormone? So when you say antidiuretic means when you say anti means against, diuretic, diuresis, it is about the water reabsorption. Kasi pag-ihi ito klase, na hindi siya mailalabas sa ating katawan. Okay, it says here that is also known as the vasopressin, which maintain the body balances by increasing the water reabsorption. So ibig sabihin hindi siya excrete ng ating katawan, ang fluids, but i-reabsorb by the tubules of the kidneys. And the effect of this is less water in the urine. So for example, pag naglalabas ka ng water, ng too much water, okay, bibigyan siya ng antidiuretic hormone, which is the ADH, in order to control at maless yung water na i-excrete through urine. How about when you say oxytocin? This is used to contract the smooth muscles at the wall of the uterus, okay, to production stimulation of oxytocin for uterine contraction during the late stage of childbirth. So for example, during labor, alam ko na sa psych ay ibang meaning ng oxytocin hormone. But here in your human anatomy and physiology, which is a BMed class, when you say oxytocin class, this is the one that to dilate vasodilation, which means this is the one as a stimulant para magkaroon ng contraction ang uterus para maglabas ng baby. The thyroid gland, its hormones and some disorders. So the thyroid gland is made up of two lobes. Okay, the smallest band known as your isthmus, which is found at the right and left sides of your trachea. So this one, your thyroid. Okay. So your trachea, when you say trachea class, ano yung trachea na yan? Your trachea is the windpipe or yun yung pagpapasok papunta dun sa lungs. The trachea closes pag food and the trachea opens pag air. Okay, this is your larynx. Your larynx is your voice box. Iba sa upper portion is your pharynx, which is your, that is the muscle which is responsible to swallow food. Pag na-swallow ng food, going to your esophagus. So this portion is your larynx, which is a part of your respiratory system, the upper portion, going to your trachea. Your thyroid gland found here. Okay, so your thyroid gland here is found here in this portion. At sa lower portion is your parathyroid. Okay, the thyroid gland is in order to function, it needs iodine. So in order to function your thyroid gland, it is necessary to have an iodine. That is the reason why if you are lack of iodine, hindi nagmamalfunction ang thyroid gland natin. In order to have an adequate intake of iodine, iodization is necessarily. So in America, especially in America, mandatory talagang gumamit ng iodized salt. Sa atin kasi may mga crack salts pang nilalabas. Nagpo-produce tayo ng mga crack salts. Pero minsan, gumagamit rin tayo ng iodized salt, which is a high level of iodine. Inadequate amount of iodine can cause goiter. So lumalaki dito because we are lack of iodine. Improper amounts of iodine cause effective production of hormones. So kailangan naka-neutralize yung iodine content natin into your thyroid gland in order to produce hormones. So your hormone which is responsible for your thyroid gland is your thyroxine, which is known as your tetraiodonathyronine, made up of 4 atoms. So pag 4 atoms of iodine, that is your T4. Pag 3 atoms naman, that is your triiodothyronine, which is your T3. So naalala nyo yun, pag nagpapacheck ng doktor, your thyroid gland, ang chine-check nila is the T3 and then the T4, which is the released by your, released using your thyroid gland. Okay, these hormones are responsible for proper metabolism of fats. Okay, so ibig sabihin, ang ating thyroid din is responsible to metabolize fats, the carbohydrates, and then the food, which are the three, or proteins, which are the 3 food macromolecules. Okay, katuwang pa rin ang thyroid para mag-metabolize nito. These are necessary for normal growth and development and for the maturation of the nervous system. So pag mababa or mahina ang level ng ating thyroid hormones, ano yun? That is what you call the hypothyroidism. Hypo means low. When you say hyper means high. Okay, pag mababa ang thyroid hormones mo, magkukos siya ng hypothyroidism. In young children, magkukos siya ng cretinism, which is a mental retardation. Okay, so yung mga ibang anyo ng mga mental retardate ng mga bata because that is what you call the cretinism. Okay? Among adults, there can cause myxedema, which is accumulation of fluids in the subcutaneous tissues. Okay, so hindi ko na pinakita, pero para siyang nag-accumulate ng fluids. Okay, hyperthyroidism, pag mataas ang level ng ating thyroid hormones. Pag mababa, hypothyroidism. Okay, so Graves' disease is a one type of hyperthyroidism, which is due to overproduction of the thyroid gland. So one of the disorders under the hyperthyroidism is the Graves' disease. So titingnan nyo sa inyong Google. How about when you say about the pagmababa naman? Okay, this can cause us the, I think that is the Graves' disease, and then meron pa siyang isa eh. Hindi ko nakita. Nasaan na ba yun? Wala dito. Okay, but that is the Cushing syndrome. Okay, TSH stimulates the thyroid gland to produce hormones. The TSH rate secretion is regulated by the hypothalamus, as I have said, your thyroid gland, okay? It is governed pa rin still with your hypothalamus, which is stimulate the anterior pituitary lobe in order to produce your thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay? Adrenocorticotropic hormone or the ACTH. Okay, klasa, you have to take note with your final examination. Pag ito ang i-memorize niyo. Okay, but I think that's a multiple choice, but you have to make a hint lang. Pag sinabing hypo, low, when you say hyper, mataas. Okay, melanocyte. So pag melanocyte, that is under the melanin, the melanin, so skin pigmentation na yan. Okay, so mag sinabi siyang hormone, this is the one that stimulate to produce a melanin para magbigay ng kulay. Luteinizing hormone, which is responsible to stimulate the ovulation during the release of your woman's ovary during the ovulation period. That is what you call the luteinizing hormone. And then for the production of progesterone as a sex hormone. Ano yung progesterone? So which is responsible to thicken the uterus. To maintain the woman's pregnancy, pag buntis ang babae, ang progesterone is the one that maintains it. Among males naman, this is the one that stimulates the testosterone, which is the sex hormone among males. Okay? In order to maintain the production of your sperm cell. Kung ang estrogen ay pinoproduce ng ating luteinizing hormone under the girls, okay, how about the testosterone for the boys? It is also for the progesterone production because to maintain the thickening of the uterus and to maintain the pregnancy of a woman. That is under the luteinizing hormone. But when you say lactogenic hormone, lacto, which means the production of your milk, which is under the prolactin. So para makapag-produce ka ng gatas with your mammary gland. Okay? Okay, it's also maintain the ovulation and pregnancy of a woman. Okay, that is your lactogenetic hormone. So that is how important are hormones inside our body. How about the parathyroid gland? So your parathyroid gland, so this one is your thyroid gland. Sa baba nun is what we call the parathyroid glands. So this one is your trachea, which is under respiratory system. This one is the larynx also. It is either your larynx, it is either the voice box kasi. Okay, this one. So this is under the respiratory system and meron kayong thyroid gland. The thyroid gland, which is the up portion of your neck, sa lower portion is your parathyroid glands. Okay, your parathyroid glands is responsible for this is to produce the parathyroid hormones. So these are the brain bone down bone matrix. So alam mo na pag bone ang kanyang responsible for this is the calcium. So sa bones naman siya yung pag-release ng vitamin D through the help of the heat of the sun. Okay, the PT parathyroid hormone cause the kidneys to conserve blood calcium. And the intestinal cells are stimulated in order to absorb calcium from the digestion in the intestine. Okay, so kailangan siyang i-absorb yung calcium ng ating intestine in order to maintain the calcium level inside our body. The abnormal production of high levels of parathyroid hormones cause, so pag nag-high level, hyperparathyroidism. Pag mababa, hypothyroidism. Yun yung tatanda, the hyperthyroidism and then the hypothyroidism. How about the adrenal glands? It's orders. It's about the adrenal glands, which are responsible for this, is the release of your, released by your adrenal cortex and your adrenal medulla. Okay, the adrenal glands are made up of suprarenal glands, which are small glands, which are found at the top of the kidneys. So kung ito yun, yung parang nagganon kayo ng inyong mga kamay, ilalagay nyo sa likod nyo, that's your kidneys. At the upper portion of that, ang inyong adrenal glands. The adrenal cortex, which is the outer part. So ang inyong adrenal glands ay meron siyang dalawang parte. The outside part is the outermost part is your adrenal cortex, and then the inner part is your adrenal medulla. Your adrenal medulla produces a large amount of adrenaline hormone, which are known as your epinephrine, and then the other one, which is what we call the norepinephrine. Kailan ba yun nire-release itong dalawang hormones? During fight or flight. So they are released by your adrenal medulla. Okay, so these hormones are activated through the activation of your sympathetic nervous system. When you say sympathetic nervous system class, that is under the autonomic nervous system. If you notice, kaya nga magkatuwang ang endocrine system and then the nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system is the one that releases your sympathetic and your parasympathetic. Your sympathetic during fight or flight, during pag-restore, pagbalik is under the parasympathetic. So your epinephrine and your norepinephrine is released during sympathetic division, which is governed by your autonomic nervous system. That is under your adrenal glands, the epinephrine and then the norepinephrine. These hormones are responsible to break down stored energy okay, which is responsible for stored energy to convert this glycogen into your liver into glucose. So pag may depletion yung glucose natin sa katawan, nagiging katuwang rin aside from your pancreas, dahil ang pancreas natin is responsible also for the release of your glucagon. So in order to the adrenal gland is the hormones which are found inside your adrenal glands are responsible also to break down this stored energy into glucose. Why? Kasi pag may depletion ng glucose natin into the bloodstream, kailangan i-convert yung stored energy into a kinetic energy. Kung naalala nyo klasa, from potential or stored energy into a kinetic energy. The glucose and the fatty acids are released into the bloodstream. So ano daw yun? Ang glucose natin ay inirelease sa bloodstream. That is the reason why it is important during the digestive process, your glucose is converted into a smaller particle, the smallest particle. Okay, marami na naman ito ang nahihirapan ng intindi. The adrenal cortex is the outer layer of the glands. So kung ang inner is the adrenal medulla, the outer is the adrenal cortex, which is the outer layer of the glands, which secretes the mineralocorticoid hormone. So this is the one that regulates the electrolytes mineral concentration. That is the reason why one of the functions of your endocrine system is to regulate the electrolytes imbalances. Okay, the aldosterone also is responsible for this, which is the one that regulates the sodium reabsorption. Diba, as I have said, class, ang sodium natin ay in-excrete ng ating kidneys. So kailangan, the cell. The sodium is out of the cell, and the potassium is inside of the cell in order to contract the potassium. Okay, ma-maintain yung contraction, and then the sodium should be out para ihigupin niya yung water out of the cell para wag but in a maintaining but balances. Cortisol, a hormone this is a small letter, is secreted by the middle layer of the adrenal cortex, which is known as the hydrocortisone that stimulates the liver to stimulate the glucose. So cortisol is responsible for digestive process to metabolize. Okay, during stressful situation, the cortisol is released into the bloodstream. So take note, class, ano ba yung sabi ko sa inyo? Pag overstress kayo, huwag kayong kumain. Why? Because that is governed by under the hormones during fight or flight. Your cortisol is the one that is responsible for digestive process. So once na in-release na yung cortisol, hihina ang digestive process. Why? Because the hunger is responsible for this is your epinephrine, which is under the adrenal medulla. Ang cortex is the outside of the adrenal gland. Ang inyong epinephrine ay stimulate for hangry and your cortisol para mabawasan ang metabolism. So, ganun ang ginagawa nila during the fight or flight. Kailan ka lang kakain pag na-release mo na yung stress? Or pwede kang kumain pa konti-konti, pero wag mong sabayan ang stress mo eating. Adrenal sex hormone, or the androgen, is produced by the cell found of the inner zone of the adrenal cortex. Okay, androgen hormones are produced not only for men, but also for women. Well, upon reading this class, ngayon ko na-realize that is the reason why may mga testosterone ako nakikita sa among women. But in a minimal amount, ano yung nire-release? The release of your adrenal glands, not your, kasi yung ovaries, ang nire-release ay yung sex hormones or the estrogen and then the progesterone. The one that released the testosterone among women ay ang inyong adrenal cortex. The Addison's disease is a condition of the adrenal cortex, which is cortisol, fails to give enough hormones, which are manifestation for this. Pag meron kang Addison's disease, mahina ang pag-excrete or pag-manipulate or pag-digest ng inyong sodium in the blood. Low blood glucose also. So makikita yun sa general chemistry or the chemical, the CBC of a person, the complete blood count of a person, which means na hindi lamang there is something wrong inside of the body kung bakit nagkakaroon ng problema. Kaya nga minsan may mga thorough diagnosis ang ating mga doktor. If there is an overproduction of cortisol in your adrenal cortex, this may lead to Cushing syndrome. Okay, so yun yung under ng di bang sabi ko is that the cortisol is responsible for the metabolism and your Cushing syndrome. Okay, the adrenal cortex is responsible for this if there is an overproduction of cortisol. Okay, the last one, the pancreas, its hormones and some diseases. As I have mentioned before that your pancreas, siya yung responsible to release these hormones, which are your insulin and your glucagon. It says here that your pancreas is a digestive organ, and that is true. Okay, which is the dual part, which is a cell known as the acini, produce digestive enzymes that are responsible for this for pancreatic juice. Your endocrine system, which is the islet of Langerhans, the part of your pancreatic hormones to release these alpha cells and then your beta cells. Okay, your glucagon is released by your alpha cells. So ano yung function ng alpha cells mo? It is to release in order to increase the blood glucose, di ba pag mababa ang glucose level natin into the bloodstream, i-release ang glucagon para increase. Your glucagon is, it is stimulated the alpha cells in order to produce this glucagon. And this stored energy, the glycogen is converted into glucose through the presence of your glucagon, which is a hormone. How about when you say insulin? The insulin for this, the responsible for this in order to produce the insulin is your beta cells. Both the alpha cells and your beta cells are found in your islet of Langerhans, which is a part of your pancreas. After we eat every meal of foods, so for example, rich in carbohydrates, so for example, the potatoes, the rice, the vegetables, you notice class, the vegetables are part of the sugar, carbohydrates, but they are under the complex carbohydrates. Matagal silang tunawin sa ating katawan, but they are non-fat. Hindi kagaya ng potatoes with under the simple carbohydrates, which means mabilis siyang tunawin sa ating katawan. That is the reason why ang mga simple carbohydrates nagkukos ng pagtaas ng level ng ating sugar level. Why? Kasi mabilis silang i-digest. Unlike the vegetables, matagal siyang tunawin at matagal kang gutumin. Okay? So if the glucose level decreases, the alpha cells in the pancreatic island secretes the glucagon. So ang alpha ay glucagon, ang beta ang inyong insulin to regulate the glucose level into the bloodstream. If the pancreas does not function well, anong mangyayari doon? Pag mababa ang glucose level, hypoglycemia. Pag mataas ang glucose level, that is hyperglycemia. Ang hyperglycemia, hyper means mataas ang blood glucose. This can lead also to diabetes pag hindi na-control ng ating insulin hormone. That is the reason why meron tayong tinitake for those non-controllable. Okay, meron silang tinitake para mag-regulate ng ating sugar level. How about pag mababa naman ang glucose level? Minsan nagtataka kayo merong mga nafi-faint or mga natutumba na lang bigla because of that low level of blood glucose into the bloodstream. What happened? This can cause kasi na ma-pass out ka or ma-faint ka or mawalan ka ng malay, and also cause coma. The testes and then the ovaries, the last part. So yung testes, yun yung the testosterone, the ovaries, the one that produce the estrogen and then the progesterone. The testosterone is a principal androgen, pero nirelease ng ating testes. Okay? How about a small amount produced by your adrenal cortex, which is a part of your adrenal gland? Okay, kung kailan ang mga women ay nagpo-produce ng testosterone, ay may presence sila because of that adrenal cortex. Both kasi ang women and men ay merong adrenal cortex. Ang adrenal cortex ay nagpo-produce ng minimal amount of testosterone. But mostly the testosterone released by your testes. And then the ovaries also sometimes released your estrogen and your progesterone. So during puberty stage ay meron itong they are regulated among men and women. That is the reason why yung mga growth hormones or like for example yung mga mustache, the presence of menstruation, they are under the hormones during puberty stage na nire-release. Progesterone keeps the lining of the uterus, as I have mentioned this. The estrogen and then the progesterone, which are responsible during the cycle of the menstrual cycle. So estrogen during the ovulation period, and the same way the progesterone is released during the process of menstrual cycle. So that is the end of your module 9. Maigsi lang 5 modules pero napakahaba ng kanyang explanation. Okay? So class, enjoy with your foundation week.